We'll do a final recap of the World Junior Championship, choosing 3 top players from each of the 10 teams at the tournament. We'll talk about all that coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down our final recap of the World Juniors, choosing 3 top players from each of the 10 teams at the World Junior Hockey Championship. We'll start off with USA, Sweden, and Czechia in our first segment. We'll talk about Slovakia, Germany, Norway, and Latvia in our second segment, and end things off with Canada, Finland, and Switzerland. We'll choose 3 top players from each of them. We already have, and we'll tell you why exactly those players were our choices. I'll break down their tournaments, how they played, and why some notable players aren't on our 3-player shortlist for their respective countries. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and use code LOCKEDONNHL after creating an account for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started here with our top 3 players for Team USA. This was a stacked roster. Let's not lie about that. There were a lot of players we could have chosen from. But I think at the end of the day, these 3 players were the standouts. I think we can start with Frank Nazar, who for me really stood out and made himself a clear contender as a top playmaker on a really good roster in terms of playmakers. So yeah, what did you think of Nazar's tournament this time around?
It was awesome, and I think I got a lot of joy specifically from his tournament because of just how difficult the last year and a half has been for him. The production has been quite slow at the NCAA level. He's been really struggling with a massive injury that almost ended his season last year, missed most of it. And in this tournament, he was really going back to his roots, playing with the players that he was playing with in his draft year, but also playing the style of play that made him. I mean, he was like second overall on both of our boards in that draft year, which would probably not be the same case in a redraft from both of our perspectives. But there was a reason that we were so bullish for his case. It is the relentless pace, the versatility, the high-end playmaking, which shone brighter in this tournament than I've ever seen it shine for Frank Nazar. And the goal scoring wasn't even really a topic for him. Like, I think he scored, 1 goal in this tournament? Wasn't much, but he didn't need to be so impactful. So I think with Nazar, it's just a wonderful comeback story, and hopefully he continues to progress on this level and can project as an impactful top 6 high-end dynamic offensive forward for the Chicago Blackhawks long term.
Yeah, 100%. And we're talking about a player who just clearly on every shift was just pushing the pace, making himself impactful. And I was looking at the player cards from Lassie Allen and Mitch Brown's tracking
Yeah.
project for the World Juniors, and he's just maxed out in every category. It's ridiculous. But moving on to Lane Hudson, who had a great tournament as well. Defensively, he struggled a lot in terms of preventing zone entries. That was a big
Shocker.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wrote an article for Habs Eyes on the Prize for that regarding his performances at this tournament. He had a really difficult first half, I felt. He was thrust into a role he wasn't used to. He is playing a lot of minutes for Boston University, but he isn't playing those minutes in the specific type of way that he was playing them at this World Juniors. He was playing on the penalty kill, playing in defensive zone faceoffs, was tasked with a lot of defensive responsibilities, and in zone, it's not bad. He's able to clear the net front. He's able to put a stick in the right lanes and intervene and all that. But his main issue has always been the fact that he struggles to pivot and mirror footwork off the rush. And that makes it really quite easy to get past him, especially if you're big and fast enough. So that was really clear at this tournament. But other than that, in the second half of the tournament, Hudson really made that first pairing role his own. He was, jump starting plays with really, really good passing out of his zone. He was manning the power play really well, distributing and kind of deciding which side USA was going to shoot from, basically, by quarterbacking that power play. And yeah, overall, I thought the second half of this tournament was a lot better than the first half. But the issues were still there. I mean, it was still obvious that it was getting blown past in coverage. But yeah, the final player for USA would be Cutter Gauthier, who played a really good tournament as well. I felt like in the first half there was a major issue with his shot selection, and it felt like that still carried on throughout. But as the tournament went on, he got better at choosing when to shoot, when to pass to the slot, especially on the power play. A lot of his shots on the power play were just shots where he had two options open in the slot, for a shot pass or a tip pass or that kind of stuff. And he would just kind of try to shoot it short side on a goalie's already cheating short side. Like it didn't really make a lot of sense for Gauthier. But as the tournament went on, he racked up the points, was playing really, really well with Oliver Moore, who was the other player there? It was Jimmy Snuggerud for a while, but he got replaced by Oliver Moore, and it was
McGroarty.
Gordy, yes, exactly, who replaced him on the line. Those two play really, really well off each other. They have fairly complementary skill sets, and I saw a lot more of that playmaking element that I like from Gauthier. Um, but moving on to Sweden, how did you like Axel Sandin Pellikka's tournament?
Yeah, I mean, Sweden had so many players that made strong cases to be in this 3 stars. So just like with the States, where there's a ton of like, we could have mentioned like 8 different players that could have made this 3 star list from the States, and it's almost just as many for Sweden. But Noah Östlund was really Sweden's high end dynamic offensive driver, and Sani Pellikka was doing the same thing from the blue line, where in the defensive zone, whenever there was a retrieval to take care of, when Sandy Pellick was on the ice, Sweden was so comfortable and calm, knowing that the puck was going to get broken out with control, and he was really one of the key components of that team that linked the defensive zone to the offensive zone. He was taking on a big role in transition, including
Yeah,
off puck. He was consistently getting open as an outlet, and I mean, we don't really have to go in too deep into just how skilled Axel Sandi Pellikka is offensively. Like the shot is just ridiculous. He has the best shot of any defenseman at this tournament, and that showed. And the playmaking game was superb, but it was the defensive game really that stood out the most, especially relative to what he has shown in his league play over the last year and a half. That
yeah,
his defensive game, like he was leaned on very heavily in high end defensive situations, just like Lane Hudson was. And Sani Pellikka did a far better job at that than Hudson did, because he's a far more fluid skater. He finds that like matching footwork off the rush is a lot more easy for Sani Pellikka than it is for Lane Hudson, for instance.
yeah,
And he was a true two-way defenseman in this tournament, so definitely deserves a big shout out. Noah Östlund was again the high-end dynamic driver offensively, and a lot of Jonathan Lekkerimäki's goals really came off of plays that were put on a silver platter for him by Östlund. But Lekkerimäki's goal scoring still definitely deserves a shout out here. The sniping ability has really just steadily improved ever since his draft year, and even though it hasn't needed to, like he's
yeah,
always had a ridiculously good shot, and the goal scoring instincts are continuing to develop. I see a lot more of that than I did on draft day a couple years ago. Like I think like he was a player that I was quite low on. I saw him as a pure goal scorer. I didn't like how adaptable he was in any other situation. And I think I ranked him like 27th overall as a result, which was an overcorrection on my part, but indicative of the skepticism that I still have a little bit of. But yeah,
mhm,
it's the decision making with Lekkerimäki that's still a question mark in terms of NHL projection. But at
yeah.
this tournament, he was getting to the dangerous areas, he was getting open, and he was unleashing that cannon of a shot, and found the back of the net what, like 7 times or something in these
Yeah,
games. Like he was very good.
100%. Yeah, and what's really interesting with Karamaki is, even though he was officially the player of the tournament there in the World Juniors, I really thought Noah Östlund was a better player overall, in terms
Yeah.
of his impact in all three zones, his ability to carry pucks in transition. Just like Karamaki was a great finisher and he scored a lot of goals, but for me, Östlund by far and away Sweden's best player, and overall the player of the tournament for me. But moving on to Czechia real quick. Obviously, Jiri Kulich was amazing in this tournament, barring a first game, which was really disappointing. Outside of that, amazing for the rest of the tournament. Helped Czechia win the bronze medal against Finland and played really, really well throughout the tournament, again, except for that first game. Andre Becker, an unsung hero on that team, scored some key goals at key moments and was especially
Including a hat
responsible
trick
defensively.
in
Yeah, a
that
hat trick,
bronze medal game.
hat
Kept his
trick in the
best game
bronze
for
medal game.
last.
You can't go wrong with that. And then to end things off, Michael Hrabal, who yes was pulled in the bronze medal game, but honestly, his replacement, who I think was Samuel Urban, could not have done. Oh, I don't think that was it, but
No, it was with a V.
his name's escaping me. I'm really bad at names. But yeah, I wasn't really kind of confident that that replacement goaltender would have done anything differently versus what Hrabal did. And overall, Hrabal in that tournament kept him in some games. He kept the score tight against USA. Basically, forced Czechia into a shootout against USA, which they lost after 7 shots. Like it took 7 shots to beat Hrabal twice in the shootout, which is pretty impressive. And overall, just a great tournament, except for that last game where he allowed 2 difficult goals,
And
and
the
was
first
pulled
game.
immediately. Yeah, and I mean the first game was, yeah, I guess so. But yeah, outside of that, we have to give a shout out to Thomas Hamara here in this top 3 for Czechia. He was good as well, but for me, Hrabal was much more of a difference maker than Hamara. Hamara was disappearing a lot more from games, I felt, than some of the other players here. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll talk about our second segment here, where we discuss Slovakia, Germany, Norway, and Latvia's top players in this tournament. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 moneyline bet. That's $150, win or lose. And that you can use on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. And the app is so easy to use, whether you want to use it for same game parlays to make individual games more exciting, which is something that I enjoy doing when I go to a live game, for instance, just to make the action a little bit more exciting. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about Slovakia, Germany, Norway, and Latvia's top 3 players in the tournament. By the way, real quick, I checked the name of that Czechian, that Czech goaltender that replaced Hrabal in that game. It was Jakub Vondraš, and surprise, surprise,
Yes,
he's a
Vondrach.
Carolina Hurricanes draft pick. Of course
Shock
he
of the
is.
century? Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, moving on to Slovakia, there were a lot of names to pick from here. They had a really, really good tournament with some really good players, and I'm surprised they didn't make it further than they did because that roster was ridiculously good, and they just ran into a really, really strong team in the quarterfinals there. But overall, I thought Philip Meshar was the best player, and it was astounding to me that the IIHF didn't give even a mention in their top 3. Their top 3 was Adam Gajan, Servak Pochovsky, and Maxim Strabak. Which was weird given that Maxim Strabak's mistake was the last thing that happened for Slovakia before they got eliminated. I don't know. Philip Meshar was the difference maker for them.
I
Just
agree.
on every shift, dynamic, pushing the middle, playing pucks from the boards into the middle of the ice, making plays cross lane to Servak Pochovsky. He made Servak Pochovsky look like an NHL goal scorer. Like that was really, really good hockey. But yeah, I mean, Meshar overall, he's made for the big ice surface. The way he overwhelms opponents with his skating is just, I mean, this was the best stretch of games he's ever played on the international stage for me. I don't think I've
For
ever
sure.
seen him play like this. And yeah, it was really, really impressive, right?
Oh, yeah, it was a tremendous tournament for Meshar, but still, I think Adam Gajan and Servat Petrovsky were also 2 others that certainly deserve the mentions they got from WIHF. Like, they may have
Yeah.
whiffed on not including Meshar there, but they definitely hit on the 2 others in my view. Adam Gajan, yet again, proving that he is a monster at the World Juniors, just really almost unsolvable to a lot of teams. And while he did have 1 or 2 more mediocre games than he did last year at the World
Yeah.
Juniors, which was a key difference in Slovakia not making the same type of glorious run.
Mhm.
He was really, really good in this tournament and did more than you can really expect your starting goaltender to do for your team.
Yeah.
And Petrovsky was, as you mentioned, was looking like a really high-end goal scorer, was constantly getting to really good goal scoring positions, really playing off well from Philip Meshar, dropping into the space that Meshar created for him. The chemistry between those two was a key component to Slovakia's offensive flair in this tournament. But yeah, I think those are the three players that really stood above and beyond in that Slovakian roster.
100%. And yeah, I mean, all three of them had a great tournament. I'd even throw Adam Shakora in that mix. He was more of
Yeah,
the defensive element on that top line with Meshar and Petrovsky, but I was really, really impressed with this tournament as well. But moving on to Germany real quick, Julian Lutz deserves a mention. Not just the point totals, not just the way he played, not just the leadership he showed for that team, but that specific moment when the Germans scored the go ahead goal and
yeah.
ended up winning that game against Finland, and he's just he's in the penalty box, he's banging the glass, he high fives the penalty box guy, and just goes and runs out to meet his teammates to celebrate that win. That was just an amazing moment for Germany, and he was a key component in that. Veit Oswald as well was fantastic in this tournament. He was the
Yeah.
points leader for Germany at the end of it. Played really well in their elimination game as well. Was really impactful, really overall just a great offensive weapon for them in that tournament. And I wanted to give a shout out to a defenseman who scored a big goal for Germany in that win against Finland. Nicholas Hubner was great in this tournament, not just the 2 goals that he scored, but also the defensive acumen, the rush defense, the ability to be aware of what's going on around him. I don't think there was any other defenseman on this roster for Germany that really came close to him in terms of that ability. So yeah, I was really impressed with Hubner as well for Germany. Outside of that, we've got Norway here with 3 really good players that stood out from
Yeah.
the pack. Michael Bransack Nygaard, we knew heading into this that he would have a good, he would have a good opportunity to showcase what he's able to do, to showcase his defensive acumen, to showcase his work rate. I was really surprised to see a drastic difference in his effort level between the World Juniors and the Allsvenskan, where he plays his regular season games. He plays in the pro league and doesn't look out of place. Puts a lot of work in. Really responsible defensively. I didn't see I didn't see the same level of drive that I saw in the Allsvenskan from him, and that was kind of disappointing. But the point totals were there. He was showcasing a shot, which is exactly what you wanted from him, right? You wanted
Yeah.
MBN to put the puck in the net, to show that he's able to put up points, and to show that his first half of the season with Mora and the Allsvenskan is a fluke, right?
For sure. Like, I think that MBN had a really strong tournament, all things considered. It was not perfect, but I think any player playing a massive role for a newly promoted side like Norway is going to make mistakes. And that's also true for our other like top star for Norway that stood out
Yeah,
massively. Another draft eligible, first time draft eligible, and Stian Solberg, who was playing 24 to 27 minutes every single night. But by the last game, after Norway had played 4 games in 5 days, he was running on an empty tank, and that last game was not a good one. Was not playing very good hockey, but there were very clear reasons for that. He was
yeah,
overworked, he was exhausted. This is an 18-year-old, right? Like that is a lot of game time to be playing against really high level competition. But I was really impressed by Norway in this tournament. They were one of my favorite teams to tune in to watch, even though they weren't exactly like winning all their games. I thought that they were playing a really fun style of play. They clearly had all their players buy into into the game plan and into the philosophy of the team. I
yeah,
thought they looked a lot more cohesive than other teams at this tournament that had a lot more raw skill with them, and that helped them a ton. So while they did get relegated in the end, this was a really good effort for Norway at the World Junior Championship, and I hope to see them again really soon. But
yeah.
before that, one last player for Norway, of course, Petter Vesterheim was also really good. So talk me through him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's Michael Bransack Newgard's teammate in Mora in the Allsvenskan, and I thought the two complemented each other very well. I saw Vesterheim as a bit more of a playmaker, a bit more of a distributor, a bit kind of the player who will drive the middle, create some havoc, and dish a puck up on the backhand to a streaking Bransack Newgard. We could have included Bakovic in there, Lukaberg as well. Both of them are really good, but I thought thought Petter Vesterheim was really kind of the driving force, transition and playmaking wise for that team, and really made that line tick with Brenzeg Newgard. It's clear that those two have chemistry. But finally, to end things off, we'll talk about three players for Latvia. We'll start off with Dan Sluchmelis, who was really, really good at this tournament, was the main leader on the ice for Latvia, and really propulsed them offensively, had a great tournament offensively as well, and overall played a fantastic tournament for them. Talk me through some of what you saw from Sluchmelis in that tournament.
I really like what I saw from him. Like, I thought that he was really standing out as a puck carrier in a way that I hadn't seen from him previously. He was really one of the most confident players in that Latvian lineup, and the way that he was taking on defenders off the rush, I liked the way that he would like, fake his way to the inside before cutting to the outside and using his speed to get around opponents,
Yeah.
and was really a lot more dynamic than what you would expect from a top line Latvian forward at this type of tournament. I thought that this was a relatively strong Latvian team, even though they did have a pretty rough loss there to Canada, that 10-1. But I thought that they had a pretty good effort at this tournament, and
Yeah.
without Losh Mountains, that would not have been the case, I don't think.
For sure. And, same for Sandusville and Manis. Those two are really the leaders
Yeah.
of that team. Lush Mellis, by the way, is a Boston Bruins draft pick. Phil Manis
Yes.
is a Florida Panthers draft pick, the only two draftees from that roster. And both of them really, really stood out for Latvia in my viewings. Phil Manis's playmaking is really good. He's able to push the middle really well. Use that frame really well to protect pucks and drive inside checks. So that was really, really good from him. And finally, Nils Finyenko for me on defense was fantastic. I think he was the defensive ace of Latvia at this tournament. Really, really played some good hockey, and overall, he was so dependable on that backhand. You knew he was going to be in the right spots. You knew his stick was going to be in the right lanes. Just having that dependability on the back end from a player like that is so important. And yeah, Finenko brought a level of stability to that back end that I was really I didn't really see from anyone else. But yeah, overall, this is the kind of breakdown of this glut of four teams. We'll get into the final three teams. We've saved the best for last. Canada, Finland, and Switzerland's breakdowns of their top three players from this tournament is coming up after these messages from our sponsors over at Game Time. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute for any event, Game Time is the best place to get that done. Game Time is a great app and website that allows you to get last minute tickets for your events, whether that's sports or a comedy or theater or anything that requires tickets, really. Game Time has you covered. They have tickets up until the last minute of events, and sometimes even an hour after they start. They've got a bunch of deals to help you save money, including Zolan deals, which are my favorite. Basically, you pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and that gives you an average of about 18% of savings. And with a Game Time guarantee, you'll always get the best price. So if you find tickets in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super easy. Just create an account, redeem code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, so closing things off with our final three teams of this breakdown of the top three players of each team at the World Junior Championship. We've got Canada, Finland, and Switzerland. We'll start off with the big one, Canada, and I think the first one's an absolute no-brainer. Macklin Celebrini, for me, was the best player for Team Canada, right?
For sure. I think that you can't really find a single player at this tournament that was able to match his like intense sequences of raw dynamism
Yeah,
at this tournament. Like there were offensive zone sequences where it seemed like Celebrini was the only player on the ice. He'd be faking through multiple different opponents, like weaving through the defenses, getting off a good shot from a high danger area, recycle, and then like pick up the loose puck and then get it back to his teammates, continue the offensive possession. Just a really dynamic, high skill player. And while yes, his production came against like Germany and Latvia overwhelmingly at this tournament, the dynamism was there
yeah,
throughout. And if his line mates had been able to put the puck into the back of the net more consistently, he would have had a lot more points than he did, and against better teams than the production came against.
yeah.
But yeah, I think Celebrini was at the very least, I think he quelled any doubts that any scout has in terms of who the default number one pick in the 2024 draft is at this stage. And maybe we see some late risers make that more of a battle as the year progresses, but that would be difficult to imagine at this stage in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what Celebrini has done in this tournament, and not just the point totals, but overall the ability to just dominate shift in, shift
Yeah,
out. I mean, this player is just he's just so difficult to handle as a defenseman. Just a player who consistently attacks downhill with speed, cuts to the middle, delays, and like drives back defenses consistently. He's just so difficult to handle. But moving on
yeah,
to Denton Matejchuk, who's the second player in our top three, a fantastic, fantastic player for Canada in this tournament. And again, just watching the the track data on Lassie Allen and Mitch Brown's tracking project for the World Juniors, another player who's just maxed out in every stat, transitionally, offensively, defensively. So much to love about his tournament, but overall, he couldn't do everything for Canada. I mean, the thing with
yeah,
Matejchuk is he's calmed his game down a lot. I thought he was a very chaotic, very just gung ho type of defenseman. Just throws the puck in the offensive zone, chases it down, wins the puck battle on the forecheck. Just it's so rare to see a defenseman chase his own dumpins, but he
yeah.
was that type of player in his draft year, and I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like he's added a lot of maturity and composure to his game, which has really kind of helped him build out his game. And overall, by far the best defenseman for Canada. It's not even close. And finally, Mathis Rousseau, who was fantastic at this tournament overall. We had a bit of a difficult time finding anyone else on this offensive roster that had an impact worth mentioning. Maybe Connor Geeky, but even then, it was inconsistent.
yeah,
Mathis Rousseau was regular in that tournament, consistent with every game, let in maybe one or two bad goals near the end, which kind of
yeah.
it was where you expect this kind of player to step it up and have a better impact, but Rousseau just really wasn't up to the task at the end. But overall, the consistency with Rousseau really, really pushed him into that into this top three. And yeah, he's the only player I'd say we're both comfortable putting here, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that, like, there are other players that I think my heart would want in the slot maybe above them. Like Matthew Poitras, for instance, I really wanted to make that big step. And I mean,
Yeah,
he came back in first game back in the NHL. He has 2 assists, of course, but at this tournament, he was a bit quieter, and wasn't really didn't look like he was a man amongst boys, which I think
yeah,
was perhaps our expectation and the expectation of Team Canada fans.
yeah.
But yeah, it was not a tournament where things were really clicking much for Canada. So the fact that Mathis Rousseau is on here and the fact that it was a very, very good tournament, but not like an otherworldly performance, is also indicative of what Canada was lacking compared to the other teams in this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking before recording about how it's so important to follow the model of USA and Sweden and
Yeah,
build your system around your players, not build your players and your roster around the system you already want to play. And yeah, that's why USA and Sweden were the top two teams in the tournament and the finalists, the gold and silver medal winners, and Canada got kicked out in the quarterfinals. They were trying to build their team, they're trying to build their roster around a structure they already set for themselves, and that, Jagger Firkus, Riley Height, and a bunch of other players who could have really helped this team offensively were not at this tournament, and that cost them a lot. But moving on to Finland, Finland had a great tournament as well. They ended up losing in the bronze medal game, so ended up fourth place. And yeah, they had a couple decent players. I thought Jesse Pulkkinen was amazing, and another player whose stats are maxed out in the tracking project of Lassie Allen and Mitch Brown there, just every category. Transitionally, he's amazing. We've talked about his skating at length. Just an amazing skater. He overwhelms opponents with pace. Defensively, really, really impressed me. He uses his frame intelligently. He's not just a big guy who can skate. He's a big guy who can skate and think the game, and that really shows. He struggled to find his footing, I think, in the first couple games, especially defensively. But as the tournament went on, it was really, really clear how impactful he could be. And yeah, Consta Helenius as well. Another, I mean, Pulkkinen is technically draft eligible because he wasn't drafted last year. He is an overager, but Helenius, this is his first year of draft eligibility, and he was amazing, right?
He was excellent. I mean, I think all 3 stars that we have here are players that have yet to have their names called on the NHL draft stage, and only one of
Yeah.
them is a first-time draft eligible. But yeah, like with Hellenius, you didn't see the level of production that you were perhaps expecting, considering that he was playing a top 6 role throughout. He started off as their first-line centerman, and he still played an excellent tournament. Like despite the lack of scoring, he was a true play connector in that roster. It was definitely a weaker forward lineup for Finland than they usually have at these tournaments, but Hellenius was playing a really collected and subtle offensive game. He was key on retrievals. He was always linking play between the defensemen and his wingers. And yeah, I thought he played a really solid tournament, but the type of tournament that gets you drafted top 10 rather than top 3 in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. But moving on to Jiri Lassila, who's the final player in our top three, another undrafted player, the captain for Finland, and not just a leader in terms of having the C on his crest, but a leader on the ice as well. Was scoring them big goals at key moments. Was coming up big when the team needed him most. I thought he had a great tournament as well. Another undrafted player could have made this list. Tommy Manistu was fantastic in this tournament. He has blistering pace. I mean, he's pushing down the boards every chance he gets. He's just driving teams back, putting teams on their heels. He was amazing as well. And the only drafted prospect I'd say would compete with this kind of glut of players would be Lenny Heminau, who had a decent tournament as well, drafted prospect of the New Jersey Devils. But closing things off with Switzerland, without a shadow of a doubt, Rodwin Dionicio was the best player on the ice for Switzerland night in, night out, right?
There was not a game I watched of Switzerland where he was not like head and heels above everyone else on his team, both physically and in terms of performances. Like Robin Dionicio was so consistent, both in the vicious physical defending, where he was like his positioning in this tournament defensively was really really impressive. I thought that he
Yep.
was among the like 3 or 4 best defensemen in this tournament, bar none, let alone just
Yep.
among Swiss players. And yeah, a great tournament. And he was scoring some big goals. He was using his big shot. He was using his playmaking ability to really be the quarterback of every offensive like zone presence that he was on the ice for. He was doing
Yep.
it all, but he wasn't the only impactful player in that lineup. Like I thought that Gregory Weber was one of the better players for Switzerland. Really had
Mhm.
some flashes of dynamism and skill, where kind of small, shifty winger who was really able to set his mark on games against like lower qualities of competition, but
Yeah.
in the games against the big boys, kind of fade more to the background, where
Yep.
Dionicio was still able to be impactful.
For sure. And meanwhile, Danilo Stinkov, who's another draft eligible who was playing in this tournament, I thought he was amazing. And
Yeah,
I've heard a lot about Leon Mugli over in the Swiss National League as a player who could be drafted in the top 50. I see Danilo Stinkov as a much better player. Reminds me a lot of Thomas Galvish over in Czechia. Two draft eligibles who play kind of similar styles, really mobile, really composed players are really able to break out of their zone fairly easily. I think Galvish has a bit more dare to his game, and I love that. But Danilo Stinkov was really solid, really dependable in a bottom pair, seventh defenseman type of role. He was really, really reliable. And finally, I thought Miles Mueller as well had a great tournament for Switzerland. I'd even throw Jonas Tybell in there, their captain. They had a decent couple of pieces, and that prevented them from playing a relegation game, which was really, really good for them. And believe it or not, Rodwin Dionicio is the only drafted prospect from this roster, and they played a decent tournament. So, yeah, impressive
yeah.
overall for Switzerland. But that wraps things up for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports on a 24/7 news channel. And make sure to tune in for our next episode as we discuss something outside of the draft for a change. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.